The Inner Garden, a Zen story about the art of focusing on oneself. In a world where outer noise threatens to drown out our inner voice, where distractions multiply like autumn leaves, and where we search for answers in countless places except the one that truly matters, an ancient yet timeless story emerges. This is the story of Akira, a young man who, like many of us, had lost his way back to himself in the labyrinth of expectations, comparisons, and external pursuits. His encounter with Master Sato in a forgotten garden would become an 8-step journey toward the most important discovery of all, the one that leads us home, to our own heart. Each chapter of this story is a mirror where you may recognize your own struggles, doubts, and moments of clarity. It is not just a story to be read, but an invitation to walk alongside Akira on the path of self-discovery, where each step brings you closer to the person you truly are. Prepare yourself for a journey that will not carry you to distant lands, but to the nearest and, paradoxically, the most unfamiliar place, your own inner garden. Chapter 1. The Noise of the World. Akira walked through the bustling city streets with a furrowed brow and a heavy heart. At 28, he had achieved everything society labeled as success. A well-paid job, a stylish apartment, friends who envied him. Yet every morning he woke up with a hollow feeling that grew like a noonday shadow. His days unfolded in a whirlwind of meetings, endless phone notifications, constant comparisons on social media, and a frantic chase for the next goal that he was sure would finally make him happy. But happiness always seemed just one step ahead, like a mirage in the desert. That afternoon, exhausted from yet another day of chasing after goals he couldn't even remember choosing, he decided to take a different route home. His feet carried him down unfamiliar streets, away from the roar of traffic, until he came upon an old wooden gate set into an ivy-covered wall. Without knowing why, he pushed the gate open. On the other side, he found a garden that seemed to exist outside of time. The contrast was so striking that he stopped in his tracks. While the world outside roared with 1,000 voices, here there was only the gentle murmur of a stream and the whisper of wind through the bamboo. At the center of the garden, an elderly man with white hair tended to flowers with movements that resembled a dance. When he saw Akira, he smiled with the warmth of spring sunlight. "Welcome," said the old man without lifting his eyes from the blossoms. "I am Sato. You have been searching in many places, haven't you?" Akira, surprised by the observation, nodded slowly. "And have you found what you're searching for?" Sato asked, now looking directly into his eyes. "No," admitted Akira. "I'm not even sure what it is I'm searching for." Master Sato straightened up, wiped his hands on a cloth, and walked over to a small fountain. "Come," he said to Akira. "Look into the water." Akira stepped closer and gazed into the clear water. "What do you see?" asked Sato. "Water," Akira replied, confused. "Look deeper." Akira focused. Slowly, his own reflection began to emerge on the still surface. "There," said Sato softly. "That is what you have been seeking, but the noise of the world has kept you from seeing it." Chapter 2. The Broken Mirror. In the days that followed, Akira could not stop thinking about Master Sato's words. Each afternoon after work, he returned to the garden, as if it were a magnet pulling him irresistibly. "Master," he said one evening, "I don't understand what you meant about the reflection. I see myself in the mirror every day." Sato, who was pruning a bonsai with meditative precision, smiled. "Do you truly see yourself? Or do you only see what others expect you to be?" Akira frowned. "I don't understand the difference." "Sit," Sato instructed, pointing to a smooth stone beside the bonsai. "Tell me who you are." "I am a systems engineer at a technology company. I have a master's degree in business administration. I live in the financial district, I drive a German car, and— Stop, Sato interrupted gently. All of that is labels, things others have placed upon you, or that you've adopted yourself in order to fit in. I asked who you are, not what you do or what you own. Akira opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time in years, he found himself without a ready answer. It's difficult, he murmured at last. Of course, Sato nodded. You've been using a broken mirror to see yourself. A mirror made of fragments from the expectations of others. Your parents, your bosses, your friends, society. Each fragment shows a different part, but none reveals the whole and real image. The master walked to the small pond in the garden and picked up a shard of broken glass that glimmered at the bottom. Look, he said, holding the fragment against the light. You can see through it, but the image is distorted. This is how you've been seeing yourself. Akira took the shard and examined it. Through it, the garden appeared fractured, multiplied into impossible angles. Then, how can I truly see myself? He asked. First, replied Sato, you must stop searching for your reflection in the eyes of others. The clearest mirror is found in the stillness of your own mind. That night, Akira sat in his apartment and, for the first time in years, turned off the television, put away his phone, and remained in silence. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable, almost threatening, but gradually, he began to hear something he had long forgotten: the beating of his own heart. Chapter 3: The Art of Stopping. A week later, Akira arrived at the garden visibly restless. His phone would not stop vibrating with notifications. His hands trembled slightly, and his eyes darted back and forth as if chasing thoughts that ran faster than he could. Master Sato, he said, out of breath. I've been trying to find that silence you spoke of, but it's impossible. My mind won't stop. The moment I sit still, I start thinking about work, about the emails I need to answer, the bills, what my boss said, what I should do tomorrow. Sato, motionless as a statue, was watching a butterfly that had landed on his hand. He did not move at Akira's words. Master, are you listening to me? Akira pressed. The butterfly flew away, and Sato slowly turned his head toward him. I heard you perfectly, he said calmly. But first, I was listening to this little teacher. Teacher? A butterfly. Follow me, said Sato, walking to the center of the garden where a small circle of stones lay. He sat on the ground in lotus position and invited Akira to do the same. Now, Sato said, we are going to practice the most difficult art in the world. What is it? Stopping. Akira looked at him, confused. But I am stopped. I'm sitting here with you. Your body is here, Sato observed, but your mind is still running through the city. Watch. He closed his eyes and remained completely still. Akira imitated him, but immediately his mind filled with thoughts. How long are we going to sit like this? What will my boss think if he sees me wasting time? I should be checking my emails. Master, Akira whispered after barely 2 minutes, I can't stop my mind. Don't try to stop it, Sato replied without opening his eyes. Simply observe it. Imagine yourself sitting beside a river. Your thoughts are like leaves floating downstream. Don't try to stop the leaves. Just watch them pass. Akira tried again. This time, when a thought about work arrived, instead of clinging to it, he tried to see it as a leaf drifting by. Then came another thought about his car, another about dinner. Little by little, he began to notice that he could watch his thoughts without being carried away by them. After what felt like hours, but had only been 20 minutes, Sato opened his eyes. How do you feel? He asked. Akira was surprised to realize he felt different, as if he had been running for years and had finally allowed himself to sit down. More Here, he said, searching for the right words. Exactly, Sato smiled. You have begun to learn that you are not your thoughts. You are the one who observes them. Chapter 4. The Neglected Garden. When Akira arrived at the garden the following afternoon, he found Sato standing before a section he had never noticed before. It was completely neglected. Weeds grew among withered flowers, the stones of the path were covered in moss, and what had once been a small vegetable patch was now a chaos of wild plants. Master, Akira said, why is this part of the garden so abandoned? It doesn't match the perfection of the rest. Sato picked up a hoe and handed it to Akira. This, he said, is the most important part of the garden, and it is yours. Mine. Everyone who comes here seeking themselves is given a section of the garden to cultivate. This represents your inner world as it is right now. Akira looked at the tangle of plants in dismay. Are you saying this is what my inner self looks like? What do you think? Sato asked gently. Akira looked more closely. The weeds were dense and aggressive, choking the small shoots that tried to grow. There was trash caught among the branches. Old papers, bits of plastic, things the wind had carried in and no one had bothered to clear away. It's a mess, Akira admitted. It's not a mess, Sato corrected. It is simply the natural state of a garden that has not received conscious care. For years, you've been feeding the weeds of fear, anxiety, comparison, and haste. You've let toxic thoughts take deep root. But look, Sato carefully pulled aside some weeds and revealed small wildflowers struggling to grow. The beauty is still there. It only needs care. He showed Akira how to distinguish between the weeds and the plants worth keeping. This, he said, pointing to an invasive weed spreading everywhere, is like your habit of constantly comparing yourself to others. It grows quickly, spreads everywhere, and suffocates everything else. Akira began to pull it out, but Sato stopped him. Careful. If you only cut the surface, it will grow back. You must remove the roots. And how do I pull out the roots of a mental habit? With the same patience and attention you use here. Every time you catch yourself comparing to someone else, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, does this thought nourish me or harm me? If it harms you, observe it without judgment, and then consciously redirect your attention to something that does nourish you. Over the following days, Akira spent an hour each afternoon working in his section of the garden. It was hard, frustrating work. Some weeds seemed impossible to remove, but slowly he began to see changes, not only in the garden, but within himself. At the end of the second week, as he stood admiring the small progress he had made, Sato approached. What have you learned? He asked. Akira wiped the sweat from his forehead and reflected. That caring for the inner garden requires the same daily dedication as caring for a real one, and that it's much more work than I thought, but also much more rewarding. Chapter 5: The Deep Roots. A month later, Akira had made visible progress in his section of the garden. The most obvious weeds had been removed. He had planted some new flowers, and the small space was beginning to show a sense of harmony. He felt proud of his work. But that afternoon, as he dug near a rose bush he had been trying to revive, his host struck something hard. Master Sato, he called out, there's something buried here. Sato came over, and together they began to dig carefully. Slowly, a huge rock emerged, much larger than it had appeared from the surface. What is this? Akira asked, wiping his dirty hands. A deep root, Sato replied. The hardest to remove, but the most important to face. Akira studied the rock. It was ancient, deeply embedded in the soil, and had clearly been there far longer than any plant in the garden. How am I supposed to move this? It's enormous. You won't move it all at once, explained Sato. First, you must understand where it comes from and why it's there. They sat beside the partially unearthed rock. In the inner garden, Sato continued, rocks represent our deepest wounds, our oldest fears, the beliefs about ourselves we formed in childhood and never questioned. Akira touched the rock's rough surface. How do I know which one is mine? Close your eyes, Sato instructed, and complete this sentence. I am not enough. Immediately, without thinking, Akira answered, I am not good enough. The words slipped from his mouth as if they had been waiting years to be spoken. He felt a knot in his stomach. Where does that belief come from? Sato asked gently. Akira closed his eyes and, for the first time in decades, allowed himself to remember. He saw his father always working, always busy, constantly telling him he could do better. He saw his mother, comparing him to other children who seemed more talented, smarter, more sufficient. I was a child trying to earn love by being perfect, he murmured. And now you are an adult still trying to earn love by being perfect, observed Sato. This rock has been guiding your life ever since. All your external success has been an attempt to prove that you are indeed good enough. Akira felt tears welling in his eyes. But it never works, does it? Sato continued. Because the wound isn't outside. It's here in your inner garden. How do I heal it? First, recognize that this rock is not your truth. It's just a belief you learned when you were very young and vulnerable. Second, each day, consciously choose a new belief to plant in its place. Which one? Sato smiled and pointed toward the sky, where the sun was beginning to set. Does the sun need to prove it is bright enough? Does the river need to prove it is deep enough? You are exactly what you need to be, just as you are in this very moment. Chapter 6. The Silence That Speaks. 3 months had passed since Akira's first meeting with Master Sato, and his section of the garden had been transformed. It was no longer a chaos of weeds, but a harmonious space where carefully selected flowers grew alongside native plants. The large rock was still there, but now Akira had built a small Zen garden around it, turning it into the centerpiece of his space rather than an obstacle. That afternoon, however, Akira arrived with a worried expression. Master, he said, I have a problem. At work, my boss has been pressuring me a lot lately. He wants me to take on more responsibilities, work weekends, be available 24/7. Before, I would have said yes immediately, but now, I don't know what to do. Sato was sitting in meditation by the central pond. Without opening his eyes, he gestured for Akira to sit beside him. What does your inner garden tell you? He asked. That's the problem, Akira sighed. Before, it was easy. I just did what was expected of me. But now that I've been cultivating this space, it's like there are two voices in my head. One says, do it, you need the money, you need the success. And the other says, this isn't what you really want. And which voice is louder? The first, Akira admitted. It's the one I've listened to my whole life. Sato slowly opened his eyes. There is a third voice, he said. But it is the quietest of all. So quiet that it can only be heard when the other two fall silent. Which one is that? The voice of your deepest wisdom. The one that knows exactly who you are and what you need to flourish. Sato stood and walked to a section of the garden where several different plants were growing. Look, he said, pointing to a young oak tree. If I tried to make this oak grow like bamboo, what would happen? It would wither, Akira replied. Exactly, because it would be struggling against its essential nature. Now look at this. He pointed to the bamboo growing near the oak. Both were beautiful, both were strong, yet they were completely different in the way they grew. Your problem isn't deciding what to do about your boss's work, Sato continued. Your problem is that you still don't know whether you are an oak or a bamboo. You've been so busy trying to be what others want you to be that you haven't discovered your true nature. And how do I discover it? By sitting in silence until the voices of fear and ambition calm down, and then listening very carefully to what remains. That afternoon, Akira meditated longer than he ever had before. At first, the familiar voices screamed loudly. His fears about money, his ambitions, the expectations of others. But gradually, as he observed these thoughts without clinging to them, something deeper began to emerge. It was a sense of peace that did not depend on external circumstances, a clarity about what truly mattered to him, and, for the first time in years, a quiet certainty about which path to take. When he opened his eyes, Sato was smiling. "What did you hear?" he asked. "That I am an oak," Akira said with a smile, "and that it's time to grow as one." Chapter 7. The Courage to Be. The following week was one of the most difficult in Akira's life, but also one of the most liberating. He had made the decision to speak honestly with his boss about the boundaries he needed to set in order to preserve his well-being and quality of life. The conversation had not gone well. "I can't believe what's happening with you, Akira," his boss had said. "You used to be our most dedicated employee. Now it seems you've lost ambition. Is this some kind of midlife crisis?" Akira had remained calm, but inside, he felt a mix of fear and sadness. He had been with the company for 6 years. It was his professional identity, his financial security, his social status. That afternoon, he arrived at the garden visibly shaken. "Master," he said to Sato, "I think I've made a terrible mistake. My boss is considering firing me. All my colleagues are looking at me as if I've gone mad. Maybe I should go back to being the person I was before." Sato was transplanting a small plant from a pot into the garden soil. "Come," he said to Akira. "Help me with this." Akira knelt beside him and watched the delicate process. "This little plant," Sato explained, loosening the soil around its roots carefully, "has been growing in this pot for 2 years. It is healthy, safe, and has everything it needs to survive. Then why are you moving it? Because it has reached the limits of its container. If it stays there, it will stop growing. Eventually, it will wither, not because it is unhealthy, but because it has no space to become what it truly can be." Together, they lifted the plant gently and placed it in the hole Sato had prepared in the garden. "Transplanting is always traumatic," Sato continued. "The plant is stressed, confused, and for a while it seems like it might die. But look," he pointed to other plants in the garden that had clearly been transplanted in the past and were now flourishing with vigor. "Once the roots adjust to the new space, the plant expands in ways that would never have been possible in the pot." Akira understood the metaphor immediately. "But what if I die in the process? What if I can't find another job? What if I discover that I'm not really as capable as I thought?" "These are questions born of fear," Sato observed. "They are natural, but they are not true. The real question is, what happens if you don't give yourself the chance to discover what you truly can be?" That night, Akira sat in his apartment and, for the first time in years, imagined a different life. A life where his decisions came from within, not from the expectations of others. A life where his work was an expression of his values, not just a means of survival. It was terrifying, but it was also exciting in a way he hadn't felt since he was a child. The next day, he submitted his resignation. "Are you sure about this?" his boss asked, surprised. "More sure than I've ever been about anything in my life," Akira replied. And for the first time, it was completely true. Chapter 8. The Shared Garden. 6 months later, Akira returned to Sato's garden with a smile the master had never seen before. It was a smile that came from within, not from external circumstances. "Master," he said, "I wanted to thank you and also share something with you." They met by the section of the garden that Akira had transformed months earlier. The plants had grown beautifully, and the space radiated a peace that reflected the inner state of the one who had cultivated it. "After leaving my job," Akira continued, "I went through a very difficult period. There were days when I doubted everything we had discussed. Days when fear was so strong that I thought about calling my old boss and begging to get my job back." "And what stopped you?" Sato asked. "That every morning I came here, sat in my garden, and remembered who I truly am. Not what I do, not what I have, but who I am in my deepest essence." Akira knelt and touched the large rock that now formed the centerpiece of his Zen garden. "This rock is still here," he said. "The wound of I am not good enough will probably always be with me on some level. But it no longer defines me. Now it is just a part of my inner landscape, not the whole landscape." "And what have you discovered about your true nature?" Sato asked. "That I am someone who finds greater fulfillment helping others grow than chasing traditional success. That I need time in silence to be my best self. That my worth is not measured by external achievements, but by how much peace and authenticity I can bring into the world." Akira stood and looked toward another section of the garden, where a young woman was beginning to work on her own neglected plot. "I've been thinking," he continued, "that I would like to help others in this process, not as a master, but as someone who has walked the path and can accompany others while they find theirs." Sato smiled with the warmth of a proud parent. "And that is how the garden expands," he said. "One person at a time, one heart at a time." They walked together to the center of the garden, where the pond reflected the evening sky. "There is something I never told you," Sato confessed. "Many years ago, I was like you too, running through life, searching in all the wrong places. Someone brought me to this garden, taught me to cultivate my inner space, and helped me find my way back to myself. What happened to that person? They became part of the garden," Sato replied poetically. "As I will someday, and as you will when your time comes." Akira understood he was not referring to physical death, but to something deeper, the process of transforming into someone who helps others find their own inner path. As they watched the reflection of the first stars appear in the still water, Akira realized he had completed a cycle. He had begun searching for something outside himself and ended up finding everything he needed within his own heart. "Master," he said softly, "what is the most important lesson I can share with others?" Sato picked up a small stone and gently tossed it into the pond. Concentric circles expanded outward, each wider than the last. "That focusing on oneself is not selfish," he replied. "It is the greatest gift you can give to the world, because only when you know your true nature can you offer your unique contribution. And when each person does this, all of humanity blossoms." This story reminds us that in a world full of distractions and external noise, the most revolutionary act we can take is to stop, breathe deeply, and turn our attention inward. Focusing on oneself does not mean ignoring others or the world. It means knowing yourself so deeply that your actions in the world arise from a place of authenticity and wisdom, not from fear or the need for approval. As Akira discovered, the journey towards self-knowledge is not always easy or comfortable. It requires courage to face our shadows, patience to unlearn old patterns, and faith to trust our inner wisdom. But it is the only journey that truly matters, because it is the one that takes us home, to ourselves. Every day we have the opportunity to be gardeners of our inner world. Every moment of mindfulness is a seed planted. Every act of self-compassion is water for our growth. And every time we choose authenticity over external approval, we create the conditions for our truest nature to bloom. The garden is waiting for you. The gate has always been open. You only need the courage to cross the threshold and begin cultivating the sacred soil of your own being. Akira, like many of us, had lost his way in the maze of expectations, comparisons, and outward searches. His encounter with Master Sato in a forgotten garden becomes an 8-stage journey toward the most important discovery of all, the one that brings us back home, to our own hearts. Each chapter of this story is a mirror where you can recognize your own struggles, doubts, and moments of clarity. It is not just a story to read. It is an invitation to walk alongside Akira on the path of self-discovery, where every step brings you closer to the person you truly are. Prepare for a journey that will not take you to distant places, but to the closest and paradoxically most unknown place, your own inner garden.